Hello YouTube. I wanted to make a video on the bass transducer butt kicker experimentation I've been doing with my driving chair using some cheap components and also some butt kicker components. There's a full write-up of this on my website Vanagony, VANAGONY.com, which is Vanagony or Van Agony depending on what day you're having with your Vanagon. So a couple of posts on there about this chair. The buttkicker Gamer 2 is actually a really good value unit. It comes with a transducer and the buttkicker mono amp, which is a good amp. But the mounting of that is great for office chairs and great for certain driving chairs, but it really didn't work for me. So I started looking at other options, and then things just kind of got out of hand, and I decided to experiment. And this is what I've ended up with. So the basic components are, I bought a buttkicker Concert Mini, which you see mounted in there under the chair, which I am pretty sure that is the identical component part that is in the Gamer 2. It's the same impedance, it's the same weight of piston. And then up under the pedals here, how's that for lighting? Pretty good. These are Dayton TT25s, I think. I started off with one and then I added a second one because they're $18. So these are two 8 ohm units in series, so effectively a 16 ohm load on the amplifier. And I doubled up because I could get the vibration I wanted by turning the amp very high, but I felt like I was driving these too hard. In fact, I'm still driving these too hard. They might just melt one of these days. So I've a unit under the chair that's a butt kicker, and I've units under the pedal board that are Dayton. And then these little, is that in frame? I've got these two little amps. These are $18 without power supply. So one of them is driving the butt kicker, the other one is driving the pedal boards. And they're pretty decent. Right now I've wired that up directly to the speaker of a bass amp, just to give you an idea. So definitely that's like barely turned on. It's a 50 watt speaker in the bass amp, so I can't even turn these up. This is a 100 amp watt. But if I turn that up a little bit, you see that it is taking a normal signal and just scraping out the bass, and then there's a frequency sweep. So if I go all the way up there, I think I'm cutting off everything below 160 hertz, and all the way down is taking off everything down to about 80 hertz, I think. Reloading. I'm playing in the background. I'm playing to simulate the audio. I'm playing a race that I recorded, and I'm just driving a little bit and hitting bumps and trying to do some general examples of audio. So off it goes. So there is a crackling there, and I haven't been able to narrow it down. Usually you get a sound like that when something is peaking, something is maxing out, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's inside the amp or if the signal that is driving the amp is too hot. And at the end of the day, I don't really care, because if these are annoying to hear. So this is either something you add in with very high volume speakers or with headphones. So let's, I'm going to attach the actual butt kicker. I want that one. Phase doesn't really matter. Let's talk more about the efficiency of these. So there's the butt kicker. So equipment wise, forget about this for a second. $18, stuff lying around, but probably adds up, connectors and things. The butt kicker was $89. This is all on Amazon Prime. The little transducers up front were $18 each. So this is, there's less than $200 in this. $20 for the power supply, which is a 4.5 amp power supply. That's plenty to supply both amps. But then, so you can hear that. You can kind of feel that, but I got to remember to talk about isolation. And the way I'm driving, I'm trying to drive the bumps to the chair, but I'm sending all frequencies to the pedals up front, and I'm getting a kind of a zing, kind of an engine zing vibration through the pedal board, which is really working out well in terms of simulation. Now, I should have said start. This is an Xbox, and Xbox is much more limited compared to PC. Consoles are much more limited compared to PCs, because with a PC, I kind of get it, but to summarize, you use software that decides which of the sounds coming out of the game go to a specific sound card, so that then you can, for example, just drive the bumps to the butt kicker, or just drive the revs to the pedal board, or that kind of control, some level of control. With consoles, all you're doing is you are taking an audio signal, and just hoping that putting the bass through some transducers like this, it creates a meaningful result. And a transducer is basically that, but instead of driving a paper cone, it drives a piston, some kind of weight, so that creates vibration and creates movement. Now the bummer is, if you are doing this on a console, you've really no control over what the game is putting out at the bass end, and that means that you've no control at all. So yes, if you hit a bump, that's going to be a low frequency vibration, and you're going to feel that. The problem with games, and I find this a lot with Forza 4, is if you're driving off-road, or if you're driving across fields, or even if you're driving on-road, the wind noise, the kind of constant burble of that they add for wind noise, is hitting down in that low frequency. So you're getting kind of a constant rumble anyway, which is a little bit unfortunate. And it's the reason why I actually like the pedal feeling more, because I feel like I feel the car through the pedals. So if you use this for 5 minutes and you have a constant kind of rumble at a 5 out of 10 level, and a bump comes along that's an 8 out of 10, all you really feel is the 3, because you've got accustomed to that baseline feeling. Put this down. Okay. What are we looking at here? And so my setup, what I've discovered with these amps, is, what have I discovered with these amps? There's definitely that crackle up top, and they're fine. Like, they can definitely overdrive the system, but the main consideration is the signal that is driving them. And if the signal is super weak, then the result is super weak. If it wasn't for the options I had coming out of my various systems to drive this, I would probably add another one, which is just a kind of preamp to boost the signal, because in my experimentation, so I have an HDMI splitter that has an audio out that is driving this right now. So I'm having left and right audio out going to a Y, so that I'm sending a mono signal down the pipe just because I can. If you put a stereo signal into these amps, it'll mix them down to a mono signal, so that's good. And that's super important. Like, you never want to drive this with the left or the right channel, because then you're driving along a track, you hit the bump strips on the left of a road, and you feel it, and then you cut a corner on the right side and you don't, which just sucks. But I know that the output from this is very hot, almost too hot. So I bought, one of the reasons why I bought this, so this is another HDMI, so this is sending HDMI to the TV and HDMI to this, and this audio is at a much lower level that drives this. It's much more balanced. So I know that this is a hot output. To give you a comparison, this is a Cheapo wired controller, and the output of this is more than the max volume of the headphone coming out of this. But another option for you is to do on Xbox anyway, is to do a wired controller like this, because it'll never go to sleep, and using that headphone out and going into the circuit board. Let's look at the circuit board in more detail. So, I have power coming in here, going through a block that is passing through this switch so that I can just turn it off if I want to. I've got an audio in, which was glued on but has come off, now dangling. So this is connecting power to the two. This is connecting the incoming audio, and then these little cards, you can either put a jack in one of these, or you can connect using these Phoenix connectors. So I have the 3 left, right, and ground going in here, spliced to here so that it's just split and shared, and then out to, that's the speakers for that one, and that's the speakers for that one. Pretty straightforward. Now this. So this is really, I wouldn't go out and buy this and do it if I didn't have it kicking around in the basement. This is a limiter and compressor. It's a rack mount gear for studio recording. And how I use it, it's hard to demonstrate the limiter, but basically a limiter is you set kind of a gate. It's like a noise gate, and nothing gets through like there. Nothing is getting through because I've set the noise gate very high. So only sounds that are louder than that noise gate actually trip and get to the amp. So this is, I'm doing my signal into this, then out of this to the amps. Now the nice thing about this is, and I can't demonstrate it in this race, but where I set this is, if I'm sitting idling, if I'm stopped, which is more a Forza thing than a racing game thing, but if I'm stopped, it just kills the signal. So I'm not having that constant rumble when I'm stopped. If I stop and I walk away, it's effectively auto switching off the amps. And I kind of like that. The other functionality it has is compressor functionality, which takes the loudest of sounds and makes them slightly quieter, and takes the quiet of sounds and makes them slightly louder, so that there's more of a universal level. And I'm really doing that in this case because not so much the driving, but in the menu system of Forza 4, the spikes of sound that they use, they're kind of woof, woof, they are so loud compared to gameplay. I'm concerned that they might actually damage the transducers. And I was much more worried about that when I only had one transducer up front and it was taking all that power. But so as this stands, a couple $100. For me, it's better than the Gamer 2 because I would have had a really hard time mounting the Gamer 2 to this system. I probably would have tried to disassemble it out of the mount and mount it the way I have this mounted, which is straight on the bottom of the chair. So for me, this is a really great setup. The Gamer, the buttkicker amps probably is no doubt better than these. These go down to 20 hertz, which is around about the same as if you used the buttkicker 2 with I think there's a button that cuts off the lower 25 hertz. So about the same as if that button was pressed. I definitely have enough grunt that I don't run this flat out. I don't run this as loud as it can because it's too much. So that's an indication that it is definitely enough. And part of that efficiency is due to vibration isolation, which is a really important part. And I learned I haven't run the seat without isolators, but I ran the front pedal without isolators, and adding isolators made a world of difference. Turns out, let me see, I don't know if I can get the light here. Where is it? Yeah, there. So that bolt, turns out I bought these cylinder isolators, which is basically a rubber block with a captive nut on both sides. So you attach something on either side, and you get the rubber vibrating, isolating vibration in between. And they might be something you'd use to mount an engine to a platform, so that it kills the vibration. I bought these originally to mount the entire seat on, but then I discovered when I was taking the seat apart that the lower seat pan is, yeah, and don't judge me, this is not finished. Like, look at that. I need to buy bolts for that, but it's all got to come apart for paint still. That entire seat pan, it was mounted by bolts, which work perfectly with the isolators. So the butt kicker is mounted to the pan, and then the pan is mounted to the seat itself through isolators. So this is really only driving the bottom of the seat. The isolators make it, how do they work? The best way to describe the isolators is up front, really. So before I put the same isolators, the isolator is in here, so the wood is attached to the top of the isolator and the frame is attached to the bottom of the isolator. So before I did this, the little transducer that was on the bottom had to work really hard before it was creating any movement that I could feel, because it had to vibrate the piece of wood, the pedal, the entire frame, like the whole thing. Now that it's isolated, this is at a molecular level somewhat floating. Molecular level, that makes no sense. This is floating more, so subtle vibrations of the transducer are transmitted better into this bass and felt. So I don't actually have to turn the power up so much, which is good for the transducer. So yeah, isolation is good. I'd love to see what would happen with the butt kicker if it was not isolated, and I might try that to see if I can turn that up and get more of a vibration through the whole chair. But I'm kind of done experimenting for now. I would also, it could be fun to mount one here. In general though, they should be mounted on the horizontal plane, because the piston has to go up and down, and if it's off center, then you run the risk of, well, it creates friction, so it's less efficient, but that's a good way to burn them out too, I think. The documentation does say to mount them so that the piston is in the vertical. What else? I mean, in summary, these amps for $18 are pretty decent for this task. The transducers up front and the pedal, I love them. I love it. I mean, I love the vibration of the pedal. I wonder if I set the phone to that, is it going to be clear, the vibration? I don't know if that transferred into audio on the video or not, but they're really good. And so I set this pedals at about half volume. I limit the frequencies as little as possible, so I'm actually getting engine rev noise. On the back, I'm at about half or more, and I have the frequency switch turned all the way down so that I'm getting more of the rumble and bass and less of the engine vibration. And yeah, like say 20, 40, add 20 for the power supply, that's 60. 20 for each of the transducers, that's 100, and 90 for the butt kicker. So yeah, we're around $200. I'm pretty happy with it. I hope that helps anybody who's like wondering if they should do something similar. Take care.